You should have access. All right, here we go. I apologize for the slow start. Everybody, McKane, this is, I'm going to pin you too. Oh, here we go. We got a thing. McKane is a awesome former student of mine. When did you just graduate in May?
I sure did.
Oh my goodness. So he was one of my last students before I left the University of Utah. A TA of mine. I've been working with McKane for a long time, and an absolute rock star and go-getter. So I'm excited to have him here today. McKane, we'll let you introduce yourself though, and we are excited to hear you. And then I'm sure we all have a lot of questions to ask you at the end of this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the introduction, Gabe. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Hello, fellow developers. Hope y'all are having a good time. It's really cold over here in Illinois. Yeah, I hope it's good in Texas. So cool. So hi everybody. This is a level design talk. I'm calling it Level Design 101. So and it's by me, McKane Searle. So I am a level designer over at High Voltage Software. What I do usually is make levels in Unreal and all that other stuff. So and also, if there are any questions, Gabe, please just interrupt me in the middle, and then we can answer questions along the way. That would be fantastic. Okay, and a little bit about my background is my passion for design really started with Dungeons and Dragons. That was something that I got really into. It was a beautiful way to start testing my levels and narrative early in development using what I would like to call as like pen and paper engines rather than like getting into the nitty gritty side of engineering that always seemed kind of daunting. I was able to test a lot of mechanics very quickly with Dungeons and Dragons, and to see if my players acted, viscerally to if I made something too OP or not, while making dungeons and levels. It was very exciting stuff. And so, do I play games? The answer is yes. You'd be surprised by how many devs say no, they don't play games. They really don't have the bandwidth nowadays, and that's totally fine. So right now I'm starting off on Spider-Man 2, so that's pretty good. I'll talk about Spider-Man 2 a little bit later about like there's some level design philosophies in there that I want to talk to you about. But when it comes to like my favorite game, Divinity 2 Original Sin, beautiful mixture of level design and narrative. A game that I hate is Civ 3. It's very important to know what games you hate and which ones you love. It will help you determine what players like and what you like as a player. Because not all of your decisions will be based as like, oh, I'm a player, so I know what's good, right? It's like, no. What does that player base enjoy? Right, like what's the style of like level design you need to look at for Civ 3 versus Spider-Man and how those don't really work together, Okay, so that's just a little bit about me. And so I wanted to go over kind of where you guys are at too, just and talk about like what I learned in school and what I really took from my degrees and my education in games. So one of the biggest ones that I want to go over that I really didn't fully grasp the gravity of is being a jack of all trades. How many of you right now don't necessarily have a specialty when it comes to games? Yeah, raise of hand. Awesome. That's a great place to be, right? You're very versatile. You're learning what you would like to be doing. A lot of times when you look at jobs, it'll say something along the lines of like level designer or even like technical designer, maybe like, 3D artist. I want to say that right now you should learn what you love to do and what you hate to do, right? Like this is the primo time to develop that skill set for discerning like, oh, do I like to be an engineer or do I even like level design? If you start to figure that out early and just like play the field, you will absolutely get to a point where you feel comfortable. One of the things that I really underestimated was the gravity of that on my resume. So this is a little snippet from my resume, this design skills thing. And I have tons of bullet points on here, maybe a little too much to be honest. But what like I got from my experience just developing my skill set was, oh, I want to be a narrative and level designer, and I can utilize those skill sets every day. Um, One of the things that I was surprised about was making using my 3D modeling skills on the job. I can't talk too much about what I'm doing because I'm under NDA, but I can say that I did some 3D modeling on like my first week, so that was kind of wild. Um, now I'm the 3D modeler designer guy. So yeah, don't be too good at something you don't want to do. I actually like doing it now too, so maybe it's Stockholm. But anyways, so I just delved into board games, 3D art, even film. Like your passion will help you develop a critical eye for how you uniquely develop games. So I definitely want to push that, um, and say, hey, being a jack of all trades, you know, is a really good thing. Um, okay. Take learning opportunities. So one of these is so on the left is an untextured model for my game Rudra that Iron Pineapple played. And he's a very big Souls-like player. And he played our game, and the textures weren't loading on our final build of the game. And so later on, we updated that patch, but we really learned how to like utilize all of the failings that we do while like we try to fail forward, right? That's the idea. If you once you fail and learn from your mistakes, you immediately become better at that thing by like a mile. Um, what I used to be afraid of failing. I used to be afraid of just like making those mistakes on the like or just asking those questions and like getting rejection. That's still something that I deal with today, of just like thinking, oh, I have to be hot shit and I have to, be the greatest, right? Developer or like I really have to push myself. Um, but make sure you're taking the time to learn, right? Make sure you're learning in your own way, retaining that information how you do it best, because learning methodologies are completely different, right? If you're more of a visual learner, do that, right? If you're more of a hands-on, hop in that Unreal Engine like once a day, or Unity, whatever engine you're wanting to use. Godot, I think, is more of the preferred than Unity nowadays, but um, yeah, that's just something that I highly encourage. Just take the time to grab learning opportunities. You even being here today is a sign that you're taking your learning seriously, and really want to pursue that. So that's awesome. Um, okay. Any questions yet so far? Cool. Love that. All right. So practice makes perfect. Beat the devil out of it. What I mean, what I mean by this, it's a Bob Ross quote, but kind of going into the idea of you really need to practice your craft and just practice all of these things that you're trying out, right? You might not know that you like 3D art, but let's say you're taking one class, right, that's in 3D art. I would argue that you should explore that more in your free time, or even just like take a couple classes in it, right, to fully understand if you like the pipeline. Um, I took Gabe's level design class twice, once in undergrad and once in grad, and then I also TA'd for it, um, in my last year of grad. And so it was really interesting to kind of really develop my robust skill sets and to keep practicing. All of these levels are from the same semester of grad. So like doing the Minecraft level on the top left. Gabe, do you still do that?
Yeah, my students just finished that project up a few weeks ago.
Oh, perfect.
And
Awesome.
just so you know, the classes changed a little bit since you took it. Actually, this is an intro to level design. So the 2D project you did is their final project. So we're just actually just starting that today. So
Oh, that's way good. Yeah, my 2D project was real mid, so I hope that you guys do a bit better than that. Um, but yeah, let's see here. And then I also made like an FPS arena in that level. I just thought it'd be good to include like try to develop a variety of levels that you also like to I guess, make. The bottom one is a final boss arena. This is more of an art shot. But the only play space that is in here is actually this round object down here for the final fight in Rudra. One important thing to note about this is all three of these shots got me my job. What I mean by that is all of these are on my portfolio, and I was just really trying to show off my best work. Just showing that you can do something, and even just taking the time to put on that extra bit of polish will really secure your job future. And I don't want to say that in an intimidating way, but I want to say that in an encouraging way, right? If you really love something and you really would like to pursue something, give it that extra level of polish, not like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna get an A on this project anyways, I don't really need to do those extra couple of steps. No. Make it portfolio ready. That's one thing that I highly recommend. Make all of the things you do portfolio ready, because if you do that, you will absolutely get a job. Yeah. So it's my job spiel. That's my little intro, I guess, for my big takeaways from my education. So if you also have further questions on that, feel free to raise your hand and we'll chat. Okay, so when it comes to level design tips, these are going to go a little bit more in depth. Ignore the step 4. I didn't remove that really. Okay, anyways, one of the biggest level design tips that I recommend is stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Don't reinvent the wheel with your levels. It takes way too much time and energy. Look, there's a method in League of Legends where when they create a new character ability, let's say they're making the Riven's Q, right? One of the things that they actually did, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with League of Legends, but one of the things they do is they take pre-existing characters and they just say, oh, let's take these two abilities and put them together. And then it creates something brand new. I believe Riven's Q is Malphite's Q with something else, right? They just said, how can we combine two existing things into one thing to create something new? As you can see with the pictures here, I'm not sure if there's any differences in these pictures, so if you spot any, let me know. But the left side is Rudra, one of the games I developed on, which is a third-person Hinduism action RPG. And the right is God of War Ragnarok. So what we did was we used God of War Ragnarok's like method for creating levels and UI and literally everything else, and just pretty much like allowed ourselves to build upon that formula right after it came out to create something that was actually fairly fun and decent. We used a lot of those similar techniques to just make levels really fast. We had 4 levels that were pretty big in size. And we couldn't have done it without just using God of War as a reference piece and understanding how they made levels. So when you make a level, use references, even recreate a level in your like for one of your assignments. It will teach you so much about level design that it's not even funny. I was going to say even I'm going to go back to the Minecraft slide. This one is King Allen's Arena from Demon Souls. I recreated it for my Minecraft assignment, and it really allowed me to really understand the metrics that you need for creating that fight and what they did back in the day. I even created the metrics based off of screenshots and sized up things. It was very over the top, but it helped a lot. It helped to make it real pretty. Okay, so again, that rule is shoulders of giants. Okay. When it comes to 2D maps, what do you notice about the difference in these two maps? What's something that you guys notice?
One of them has more than one floor.
One of them has more than one floor. Interesting. Okay. Any other things?
One of them is far more visually readable.
Absolutely. Yeah. And with that said, which one do you think is easier to understand?
Honestly, the left one seems easier.
Absolutely, right? So like, although the right one can be pretty decent to understand on like a top-down level, like where it's like, oh, this is the general area, but it's like, what's inside the park? What does that gameplay look like, right? On that right-hand side. What's inside labs? How am I supposed to understand from this map what the gameplay is supposed to look like? That is from the FPS game that I showed you earlier. The left one is from Greedy Goblin, which is a 3D platformer that I developed. And if you look at it, it's pretty straightforward with like, where are the treasure chests? Why is there a secret little torch above here, right? It even shows you gameplay pathways that you can run down. What are the gray areas? Oh, it looks like it's a goblin pit for death, you know? The more detailed your top-down map is, the better it is for you. It helps in every pipeline of development. Because then you do not have to get the question or have a full ass meeting where it's like, oh, what does that mean? Like it's like, oh, what's in the theater? You're like, I don't know. Like if you say I don't know to that question more than or rather than like it being explicit on the page, it really takes a lot of time out of development. So again, with that, going back to the idea of adding polish, take your time with your top-down maps. Take your time crafting these levels to be clear and concise. Add a legend, you know? The legends are so helpful. I use them every day in my level design to make sure that, you know, we're everybody's on the same page, really. Especially like because you collaborate with so many different disciplines as a designer. So keep that in mind. All right, so detailed 2D maps. Next one is document your process. This is really a portfolio rule and to help you continually secure jobs in the future. Even when you get your job, document it. Because once your game releases, you can put that shit on your portfolio and it's going to be fantastic. It's going to be so good. And you're going to be so happy that you took pictures throughout the process to show how you iterated and even learned on your levels, right? Even doing that right now in school is so important to make sure that you are securing that job, right? It also was really fun to see how you grew, right? As like through your own personal goals and like, hey, like I'm going to go on to this project, never have, you know, made a alternative controller RTS before. And then now you can see your process for developing that, and it could even be helpful for other developers in the future if you're developing on a genre nobody else has made. So definitely take that into consideration. Make labels for things if it's not so obvious that a fifth grader would understand it, you know? Like here in this right image, what the hell is even that, right? Like I don't know anything that's going on there. But on the left image, right, you have a narrative introduction. You're like, oh, okay, that's a little spicy. I like that. I don't know what that means, but like it gains intrigue, right, into who you are, who you're like, what your thought process is when developing a level, and etc. So, again, just document your process. Okay, so this is a big one. This is a big one for me, which is don't fear iteration. So on the left, that was how we started off with Greedy Goblin, my capstone game for undergrad. It was originally like a bird's eye, like kind of like isometric approach, very Tunic, or even Moonlighter. And we went with this kind of bird eye camera perspective, but we realized that a lot of the stuff we had was not fun. Nobody really liked that perspective. It was causing a lot of problems with art. And so we constantly got the feedback of, oh, your game is not fun. So we had to iterate as designers. We had to iterate as level designers. We were freaking out. We were like, I don't even know what is fun at this point, you know? Like we were having all these existential questions. And then we're like, you know what? Let's just try different perspectives and different puzzles with them. So then we switched to more of a third-person action adventure camera for this development, and we iterated on that core design, right? We pushed it and just to see if this next thing was fun. Guess what? It wasn't. It was not fun at all. And we were like, wow, what are we gonna do? We were starting to get the design team that I was leading at the time was we were all getting yelled at by art and engineering, just like, what are you guys even doing? When we were just freaking out trying to solve a problem for like 2 months. So after that first semester of capstone, because my capstone was 2 semesters long, I was like, okay, what do we need to do to make this fun? And so when we started looking at other 3D adventure platformers, and we realized that we needed to lean way more into the platforming than we were. And so we iterated to then just make a very Banjo-Kazooie-esque game where we like messed around with cameras and like did cinematic things and like created areas where you have to use a bird's eye view versus a 2D platforming perspective, right? And we just really had to work through the hard process of figuring out that our game wasn't fun. Even though it was greenlit, it still wasn't fun. But then we got to this really fun point, and that was in like our last month of development. It was crazy. And we were able to pull off a lot of our puzzles that we had, and finally click everything together. Just by iterating on the level and testing things out. If you're afraid to iterate, then you're going to end up with a game that isn't very fun, because at the beginning it might not be fun, right? Try and switch things up, try things, right? As a level designer, I usually, I spend so much time crafting that first white box or that first gray box, and then I feel like almost like, oh, it's my baby, right? And then like I'll get comments on it and people will say, oh, you know what? That actually does not go with art at all. We actually have to change up the entire space. That's still an iteration. That's still moving towards collaborating with your other disciplines. So like that is a positive step in the direction. Sometimes even when I make a level, it is up for discussion, right? On Rudra, we often had times where we would get together, we would call out things in the level that are just not working, and then we would have to drastically iterate on those, right? Like if it's an encounter that has, circular walls in the middle, and then and you just can't see around them, it was really problematic. So we just had to keep iterating and iterating until we had this beautifully polished piece, right? It can be really hard too when you start on a project and just hop into white boxing. Everybody's familiar with the term white boxing, correct? Awesome. Love that for us. So when it comes to that white boxing phase, it can be really hard if you're not working off of a 2D map, right? If you're just kind of thrown onto a project, that's what I had to do with Rudra, is just like quickly create white boxes out of thin air. So again, try to make 2D maps that lead into white boxes. It will cause a lot less problems with iteration, and it will actually be very, very helpful for you. Other notes on that, the image on the right is actually this is kind of like a subsection of this note of don't fear iteration, which is also don't be afraid to cut stuff. That is the second level for Greedy Goblin that was never made. Like I put time in, this is like one of the versions that we had. I wanted to create a second level for Greedy Goblin. We all were on board with it, and that was a great idea, but we hadn't even finished the first level. Like, I don't even know why at that point we were like, oh yeah, second level sounds great when we have 2 months of development left and we still haven't figured out the first one. It's like, no, don't be afraid to cut things, right? At the very beginning, like expand all of your ideas out, and then in the middle, start reducing those ideas until you have a fine, like, I guess, beam of fantastic level design ideas. That includes all design and disciplines, really. If you just like expand out and then reduce, you make a beautiful game. So okay, that's enough harping on don't fear iteration. Let's move on. Okay. Any questions about level design tips that you would like specifically addressed right now? No? Cool. Feeling good? Again, just raise your hand if you have any questions along the way. Okay, so last tip for level design. Designers collaborate. You are the interlocking discipline between all other disciplines. So, for example, if an artist needs an asset in the engine, they could be placing their assets, and that usually happens in industry, right? and I would hope so in your classes as well. But if they can't place it in the engine, or they need some sort of like design, like they need like for somebody to put a collision box on there as it gets into the engine, that's usually the designer's job, right? To make sure that that collision box is secure, it's safe. Again, it's kind of like everything in design is also integrated with other disciplines. Like as a designer, there are tons of meetings. There are meetings all the time about things that you need to be doing. So like one day you'll have a meeting with art. One day you'll have a meeting with just your game director, right? So some days you'll have meetings with the engineering team to talk about how you screwed up Perforce for the third time, right? You know, things like that are things to keep in mind, because you really have to learn how to collaborate with other disciplines and honestly collaborate with each other. Recently, there was a study that came out about students who study together versus students who study separately. And the students that were studying together learned a vast amount more of information. Being in a Discord call with your friends as you're making a level or doing any other homework helps immensely, because you get to ask those confusing questions that, ChatGPT just can't answer, you know? So just keep that in mind. Designers collaborate, so try and collaborate with your fellow students. It really does help, seriously. Okay, so that kind of wraps up the design tips portion, and we can now go into resumes and portfolios. Gabe, how are we doing on time?
We're about 30 minutes in. I think we're good. So yeah, we have time, and then we can do some Q&A at the end.
Perfect. That sounds wonderful. Okay, so resumes and portfolios, right? What do these look like? And these will apply to all disciplines, so just keep that in mind. But I have a couple things specifically for level designers, so don't worry about that. Okay, so steel, absolutely steel. Can you spot the difference between the left and right picture? There really aren't a ton, right? Besides content. One of the things that I was doing to make sure that I could get a job in the industry, just because I had no idea how to make a resume. My first couple of resumes were hot garbage, and I was getting a bit discouraged based on like my applications. And so I just had to problem solve it like it was a game and say, what is and is not working, right? As you can see on the left image, that is my resume. And I wanted to make it very visually clear. And so then I went to a game designer who is in the industry, and I was like, okay, this is a new graduate that just got a job. How do I get a job as a new graduate, right? And so then I just like looked at like their journey as a game developer, and I tried to mimic that as well within my own resume. I had to change a few things, of course, because there were differences. But again, right, see how you can make that resume work for you, right? I'm not saying deliberately like just take their exact format and use that as your template, because then you're not going to learn anything about how to create future resumes, right? Take that, steal that format, apply it to your own, and then change things up that represent you as a person, right? One of the things that I always get comments on about my resume is that it feels very professional, and it is representative of me in various ways. Like I have relevant work, and then like, tabletop game master for 11 years, like who puts their D&D stuff as on your resume? I do, because I think it's important. I think that every person should know that I played D&D for 11 years, and how that makes me show like my passion as a designer, right? So those are just things to keep in mind, right? Use layouts from other people who have recently got into the industry, and just say, and instead of saying, damn, they got my internship, right? Say, oh, you know what? I can learn a lot from them. I could learn a lot from those folks. Okay, so next is don't undersell yourself. So these are two different versions of the same resume. And I think you can spot the differences, right? One of them, very plain text. And I start off with documented as a narrative designer, right? Documented in-depth research of Hinduism and Hindu epics for cultural accuracy, right? That is not a great way to start off. Like, you need to start off strong, right? Like, for example, in this other one, I also used Rudra as a level and narrative designer because throughout the process, my job title did change to become both, right? And so then I put level and narrative designer, created 2D level layouts, 3D white boxes, and mechanic focus prototypes for 5 shipped levels. That is strong as hell. If somebody just reads that one line, which most likely they will only read that one line, right? That is a very strong way to introduce yourself and will encourage them to read more about you. Make your sentences interesting and do not undersell your experience. If you were leading that team, like, make sure not to put lead on that team, but put, like, for example, assisted development by running meetings for design, right? Things like that to show that you collaborate in this profession are very, very important. Okay, so only your best projects. Now, this is, again, 2 different resumes, but on the left, you will see that there is a lot of projects with 1-sentence lines. Nobody reads that, I guarantee you, and that resume actually performed drastically worse than the resume on the right for me. Again, it's all different, and you're gonna get tons of different feedback on resumes and portfolios and all that jazz. Try to find out what, like, I guess, tips work for you. So if this tip works for you, fantastic. But again, really only use your best projects, putting like 3 on there, and then just list out all of those tasks you did, right? Like, I even have some system design tasks that I did in the Battle Bard section on my good portfolio on the right. So the left one is pretty clean, and the right one is kind of packed with content. So those are kind of the 2 dichotomies that you're going to have to work with. So just think about that, right? Okay. All right, next. Oh yeah, steel layouts again, right? Absolutely, steel layouts. So this is mine. You can look at my layout and try to mimic it. It will take you hours. And I only say that because it took me about 1 solid week to just make the layout in Wix. I looked at like 10 different portfolios and just started to create my own, and it was hellish to just make my own. So again, if you can work from a template, fantastic. It'll save you a lot of time. But again, if you're a particular designer, such as I know most level designers and designers to be, and creating your own website, make sure to make it your own, right? Look at a design, take that idea and run with it, right? Craft it to how you want to be represented and how you think that people will get to know you as a professional, right? Okay.
McKane, what's your feeling on ArtStation for a layout for a website?
I think it's fantastic. ArtStation for level design and art are phenomenal. I do know that if you have other types of design that isn't level or very visual specific, I would recommend building your own. Like, for example, I have a lot of narrative pieces, and there also was a boycott of ArtStation a while ago, so I didn't know if that also affected things for artists and whatnot. So that's something to keep in mind. But again, ArtStation's fantastic, and so is making your own in Wix. So, or whatever software you use, like Squarespace. I've seen beautiful things in there. But again, depending on the software, you limit yourself in various ways. So, okay, so we'll move on from stealing layouts. One of the things that I would recommend is showing off what's inside your head, right? Like, as a designer, trying to get in the industry, how do people know how you work, right? Oh, you write paragraphs in your portfolio about how your thought process works, right? Or what was your design decision based on X or Y principle, right? If you start to throw around terminology in there, I guarantee you that not a lot of people are going to read it, but they're going to be impressed that there's a bunch of words on that page for sure. That was one of the biggest comments I would get when I would like interview with different folks, is they're like, wow, it's awesome how much information you have on here. They didn't read shit. Like they didn't read a single thing on there. So if you have like a summary section, I would highly recommend that too. Having a summary at the top that's like, oh, look at me, I did all of these cool things, and then going into drastic detail about your process, it's kind of phenomenal. One of the best portfolios I saw in the industry was this person who used to be a brain surgeon. And she had a complete psychological breakdown of her like design for her gameplay, and she like went into like detail about using academic research for like her theory about crafting psychological elements in the game. She will never not have a job, right? Like just going into and making your portfolio look that brilliant and that impressive, it does work. Also having videos of your development, like doing like fun behind the scenes stuff, or even like a presentation video about like, hey, you know, as the designer, you know, like how did you do this? Go make some friends in film and they will film it for you, I promise. Like they are always looking to film stuff. So if you have film friends or you are the film friend, absolutely figure out how you can record videos and post them on your social media, right? I strongly recommend having a LinkedIn if you don't have one already, just because a lot of people like to celebrate their work and connect that way. So but yeah, so that's one of the examples of the long text is on the left, and like the breakdown of my process, even with like videos and GIFs and whatnot. And then on the right is my video for my first year in grad on a game called Battle Bard with my producer who was interviewing me at the time for what's going on in the game, and we broke it down very nicely. So, okay, all right. So this goes into the interviewing stage. And these are just a few of the places that I've interviewed with over since I graduated, even when I was in my last semester of grad. Be excited and don't assume is my advice here, right? Be excited that you're getting these opportunities, right? And be really pumped that you are like, you know, like having interviews with these folks. And if you're not, right, I would say if you're not getting interviews, revisit your resume. Absolutely. Because that is the key factor in why you're probably not getting interviews. Or if you are applying too late to something, make sure you're applying within the first day. That's a strong recommendation that I have because you will be seen earlier and considered as a candidate much faster. I have been on both ends of the spectrum where I applied within the first 10 minutes or I applied 3 months down the line, right? Like, which one do you think that I got an interview for, you know? And yeah, so just keep that in mind, right? Especially with the high amount of folks trying to get jobs right now. So again, with the don't assume, I have a story about that, which is I assumed I was going to get an internship at Insomniac, right? And that actually changed my whole demeanor of when I was getting my first two interviews there. And I had assumed I was going to get it, and I actually acted a bit arrogant about it. That's a big no-no to do when interviewing. If you act arrogant, right? There's a difference between confidence and arrogance. Um, and my interview fell through. I totally thought I was going to get it. I was very qualified. But a lot of times, you have to also pass a vibe check. You have to just show that you are a right culture fit for the company, right? So for all of these companies, so I interviewed two separate times. So these aren't like cumulative amount of interviews. These are two separate sprees of interviews. So like two separate times at Insomniac, two separate times at Nintendo, once at Ubisoft, two at Kerbal, two at Wizards, two at Blizzard, right? Like I went through so many interviews and just it was a really big learning process. So if you guys can, try doing mock interviews with your friends or other folks in the class. That helps a lot, and will help you feel confident about your work. So that's something to keep in mind. And I'm happy to talk more about the process of how I got hired onto High Voltage, and really elaborate on like, you know, making choices when it comes to finding a job, right? Okay, so moving on from that, keep practicing. Do not give up. So what I mean by this is I submitted 330 applications until I landed my job, right? Every single dev has a different story about getting into the industry. Whether it's they got in on the first try because they just wrote like 10 paragraphs to the recruiter telling them like, you know, their life story and like why they wanted to work on like, I don't know, World of Warcraft or something. I have a buddy who did that. Just first time he applied and just got right in. And then for, you know, other folks, it takes 330 applications. It's a lot, right? Again, that kind of comes down to luck of the draw. Sometimes you don't do anything wrong and your application is thrown away. You could have the best looking application in the world, but again, your timing could be off. Maybe you're just like, maybe they already found somebody, right? One thing that will help you get a foot in the door is making friends in the industry. So not sure if GDC is on your radar or like Discord communities, right, with game devs in them. But I will just suggest that, you know, it doesn't hurt to just try and make friends. I don't like the term connections because in the games industry, that just is not true. At least in my opinion, you're usually making friends because everybody's so friendly, kind, and very open to like having conversations with you, or they're really very much not, and that's totally okay because sometimes people are way too busy to really like, you know, take the time and make those connections, right? So again, do not be discouraged. That's easier said than done, but again, instead of treating it like a personal attack, try to treat it like an iterative approach, right? How can I do better on the next one? How is it that my resume is not working? Is my portfolio not working? You can always ask a recruiter for feedback, and the worst thing they do is say no, right? So if you ask for feedback, they can always just say no. Just keep that in mind, right? I got some great stuff from recruiters. They're like, hey, there's actually nothing wrong with your portfolio and resume. I'm like, oh, that's great. Then why didn't you take it? Like, oh, you know, like my buddy's son just got hired in the position. So you're like, ah, shit, I can't be my buddy's son. You know, so again, referrals, internal referrals do help. So make friends. That's a really big one. Okay. Okay, that is the talk. So please, I got time for questions, and we can roll into Q&A, and I really hope you learned something. Feel free to add my LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to connect with you and answer any questions. Yes, blue shirt.
What do you suggest for organizing a portfolio for narrative design?
Ah, yes. The ye old question that is always infamously hard to find. My recommendation is having a variety of different things that you've done in terms of narrative. You know what? I'm gonna go to my portfolio and I'm gonna show you mine. So here I have a bunch of different writings. I have like writing samples, and so what I did to gamify it a little bit is Tale of a Sword Saint is a, you know, samurai folklore Japanese story, and so I themed the entire page like that, right? And then I just have the full short story here, right, for people to read if they want to. It can be as simple as that, or it can be as complex as going to Rudra, A Tale of Time, which is my first thing. It takes a second to load, so just bear with me. Let's see here. You know what? Maybe we gotta go here. Ah, there we go. Love that. All right. Well, we're working on it. We're working on it. Don't put too many images in your things, folks. Alrighty. Okay. So even in my Rudra portfolio for narrative design specifically, there is a difference between game writing and narrative design. Game writing is mainly screenplays, and writing outside of the game. Narrative design is how you integrate that narrative into the game. So keep that in mind. But if you look here, I have an animatic with the screenplay right next to it, right? And you can scroll along and read the entire screenplay. I would also suggest buying books from games. Spider-Man's infamous, like, why did I say infamous? No, it's famous. Thank you. Words today. Spider-Man has a famous screenplay book. So anyways, yeah. I would just suggest looking at my portfolio. You can find it at McKaneXSearle.com. If you want to just like review this and look at it yourself, it helps a lot. Also, again, look at other narrative designers in the industry. They have great stuff. Okay, hopefully that answered your question. Other questions? Yes, in the back.
When putting images for your portfolio, like obviously it's not gonna be like the level of polish as like a finished game, but I guess my question is, what's pretty much the level of quality of images that can be in the portfolio?
I would say highest if you can. What I mean by that is like, so for example, so like here, right, since there's text on the screen, I included a high res screenshot in the background that one of my artists made for the game, right? And I will even go to my levels page so you can check that out. But like here, like this video does not look fantastic in terms of quality, right? But like these images detail my process and look really good, right? And so that if it's eye-catching, that's fantastic. But as you can see here, I didn't put a background here because I want them to look at the images. I made it pure black so that the only thing they're looking at is those little details, right? So I guess my answer to that question is, what level of detail do you want to show to somebody trying to hire you? And usually my answer to that is the highest, right? Does that answer your question?
It is.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, other questions?
I wrote a few questions in chat. I'm not sure if you've seen them.
I haven't seen shit, but I would love to. Gabe, could you read those off to me?
Thank you.
So Jonathan asked, question, what tools, systems, and processes have you discovered that have catalyzed your level design acumen?
Interesting.
Specifically, he's asking about software such as Figma or philosophy such as anti-fragile.
Interesting. Those are some very detailed questions that I may not have the answer to, but those are some really good questions to start asking. I would say, in terms of philosophies, they usually will come up in terms of how other levels are made in a game, right? So, for example, the Ruins philosophy of like you want to make a space that feels lived in, and do environmental storytelling via an abandoned place, right? Dark Souls does it. New Vegas does it, things like that. Bathroom skeletons, which is something that I did not know was a term until I saw the GDC talk on bathroom skeletons, which is the question of diegetic storytelling with level design. And so if there is a bottle of pills in a bathtub, next to a bathtub, and a toaster in the bathtub, and there is a skeleton in the bathtub, what killed the skeleton, right? You have no idea, right? It's that sensation of using, again, ruinous props to create something. So again, a lot of these philosophies will arise in organic ways during your process of like, oh, is that a cool idea? And you're like, yeah, okay. GDC talks are phenomenal at doing that. Also looking at architecture, right? Design, phenomenal. Talking to artists about how you could make something cool, phenomenal. You'll come up with new and creative ways to develop levels and maybe even your own philosophy. So keep that in mind. And then in terms of software, I primarily use I'll use like Unreal, Unity. I just use like the built-in software for the most part, just so that I can get really good at like industry standard stuff. Because you won't have a plugin all the time, right? You won't have a plugin that will make life easy for you. So learning the hard way does help a lot. So keep that in mind.
Awesome. So the next question that was asked, I'm going to paraphrase it just a little bit. They asked about your comment about stand on the shoulders of giants. And basically, how do you position your personal work so it doesn't seem like fan fiction or a copy of that?
You really own, so like, let me put it this way. Like 50 Shades of Grey is Twilight fan fiction, right? It made shit tons of money, right? Like, so, or I have that reversed. Anyways, both of them very successful works, and one of them is literal fan fiction. Fan fiction, it only seems fan fiction or low quality if you make it appear that way, right? So I'll even go to my homepage and I'll show you kind of like what might be like this kind of looks like a student game, right? Tellerang. I don't say student game in a derogatory way, but I do say it in terms of not being able to showcase it very well. I will say that Rudra looks incredible in comparison, right? And I would get comments all the time as if this was just like a AAA made game. And I'm like, oh no, I'm like, no, this was indie, this was 26 people. And they're like, no way. There's absolutely no way that was only 26 people in 8 months. And it's like, yeah, no, it was. And again, if you also don't clarify, you seem very professional. So if you never say that, oh, this was just a student game, right? If you say, no, this is an indie game that was developed with this many developers, right? Do not discount your experience because you're students. You are developers, and as Gabe knows, developers, right? Again, just don't make it appear that way. Even like this disparity thing, although it's a white box, right? These images showcase that it could be a, you know, a really high level white box, right? Even though it, like, yeah, this picture, right, might look a little janky, this looks like a really clean white box with no like no propping done, right? So just take that into consideration. Did I answer that question, Gabe?
Did you answer it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, cool. Gotcha.
And John, chime in.
I noticed on your portfolio, you had a you had a different role than level designer. You had like a champion design and an intern at Riot or something like that. How did you get that and how did it go?
Gotcha. So that was that champion design at Riot. That was not my portfolio. That was somebody that I admired's portportfolio and
Okay.
resume. Yeah. But I knew him very well, and so yeah, he did great stuff. So.
Speaking of internships, and then we'll get to, there's more in the chat. There's I know with the students, there's a lot of concern about getting an internship, and if they don't get one, like the world is going to crash. Like, what's your take on internships and how necessary they are?
So I didn't get an internship, and I tried my ass off to get one. So an internship does help you to get into the industry, like, you know, any industry work does, right? Even if it's freelance, whatever. Every year you're in school, you should apply to an internship or multiple. I would highly recommend at least applying because you never know like how that is actually going to help you in the future. So that's my quick answer on that one. So we can get to a few more questions before I got to skedaddle.
Oh, you bet. I appreciate your time. Okay, the next question, did you have any jobs or anything not surrounding game development that was put on the portfolio, or did you cater only the skills from the game working?
One of the things that actually secured me a interview as an encounter designer for Blizzard was actually my teaching experience. And with Gabe and being a TA and things like that, because they really valued somebody in that position that could teach others. So again, if it's a position that's like a mid-level or higher, right? I'm currently in a mid-level position right now also because of that, because I can teach others how to do my skill set, right? Take that into consideration, right? Take into consideration, like, if you have a background in architecture and you're a level designer, hell yeah, that's fantastic. If you are an artist and you have, I don't know, like a philosophy background, that's like, or, you know, you can incorporate that too. You show that you are also interesting by not only being one thing, but being many, right? So just take that into consideration. Do we have any more questions, Gabe?
Two more, yeah. And
cool,
then,
let's get to them.
sorry. Do you have much experience looking at audio implementation portfolios? And if so, do you have any advice for developing portfolio for audio work?
I do not have advice for that. It is different every time, but I would suggest making reels of like whatever type of audio you would like to be doing and showing off your process in very quick and audible ways.
All right, and we're punching close to the time. So last question, what do you think went well for you when you interviewed at your current position that got you the job?
I would say, so I actually had to choose between two jobs before getting to this one. I was either going to go to be a narrative designer in Ubisoft France or do level design here in Illinois. And the thing that they loved both about me is my drive to actually create and my expertise and my knowledge. So again, take your time to learn what you want to specialize in. But again, if you're a jack of all trades and a master of some, it's better than being a master of one, right? Keep that in mind. The full quote is very important for jack of all trades. So again, if you have multiple skill sets, utilize that. Because if you just have one skill set, you don't have a variety of things that you're capable of doing, even on smaller teams. Like right now, I'm doing art and level design, right? So that's something to keep in mind.
McKane, you are fantastic. Thank you so much for preparing that and sharing it with our students. I know they really appreciate it and we value your time. So we're gonna let you go. But I think you mentioned it before. Is it okay if I share your information?
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead and yeah, I'm most accessible on LinkedIn. So if you guys have any questions, hit me up there. Yeah, and just reach out if you ever need like reviews on stuff. I'm happy to help.
All right. Thank you so much, McKane, and we'll chat soon.
Absolutely. See y'all later. Have a good one.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.